Hello everyone and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. We have with us this afternoon Colin McKeown of Whitespace, and he was recently speaking with you about packaging. And today we're going to look at service and UX design. And I'd like you all to bear in mind that this is a complimentary webinar to the e-commerce bootcamp that we're running. Some of you may be doing the e-commerce bootcamp, and if you're not on the present program, we will be rolling one out in the very near future. So with that, I'm not going to delay us any longer, and I'm going to hand over to Colin. Thank you, Colin.
Thanks, Emer, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you back again. Last week, we talked a little bit about packaging. This week, we're in the service UX design area. Increasingly, this is becoming more and more important around websites, ways of doing things digitally, etc., etc. So I wanted to sort of do a little bit of a presentation which will touch on some of the issues that I feel are important around both service design and UX, and why you should perhaps consider having a little bit of a review around what you're doing, your product, how you design it, how you make it, how you manufacture it if you're in that space, and how you can then relate that to how you look online in terms of your branding, in terms of the way in which you connect with your end users and your customers. The big challenge is obviously with COVID, the migration, if you like, from one business world into an online business world has been absolutely phenomenal. I will touch on things that I've found through my mentoring with DCCI. Some of the little horror stories that I've come across regarding having websites designed. I'm not going to name and shame anyone, but it's very much a case of, I think sometimes for makers, we tend to divorce the problem to a web design company or a designer or a friend who knows a friend who has another friend who does websites. And all I would say is that this is probably one of the most important aspects of what you will do as a business, your online presence, how you will manage it, how you will take it forward, how you will develop it in the longer term. And just to sort of divorce it to someone else who perhaps may not have the experience of working in this sector, may not have the experience of marketing, I would suggest is perhaps not the greatest starting point. So as I say, let's go through this. If there's some questions at the end, I'll be happy to answer them in any way I can. So we're going to start off with service design. The transition to online sales has been immense. There is no doubt it has altered the relationship with our products, services, and the customers. And I think increasingly for some people with COVID, we felt that it might have been over quite quickly. And unfortunately, we're still living with the whole COVID situation. And can I just say, thanks so much for coming this afternoon. I know you're all dealing with a mixture of looking after relatives, homeschooling, etc., etc. But I think sometimes these sessions are good just to give us a focus around perhaps some of the issues that you might face going forward. I think the big thing is we've all been forced to think differently about what we do, what we make, can we sell it, how do we get raw materials anymore? And with COVID and the additional issues around Brexit, I do hear a lot of stories from makers where the original supplier will no longer supply because of issues around tax and what have you. So we are in a very uncertain time, and I think it's a really challenging time. But I'm also a great believer that with every challenge comes an opportunity. And I think if we approach these things in a different sort of way, we may come out of it a lot stronger as an industry. The other thing I think regarding the research, the online world has really altered the way people think. I have a granddaughter who's 4 years old, and she's convinced that Sam the postman is like Santa Claus. Her impression is, she was here one Saturday, we got 3 boxes in fairly quick succession. and she actually mentioned to my better half, could she talk to Sam because she wanted a toy or whatever. So it's incredible how quickly people will adapt, will change, and will alter the way in which they procure and, you know, get hold of things as they need. I also believe the high street will return. I know it's been under heavy artillery for a number of years now, and online versus bricks and mortar. And I know that a lot of people have reservations about what form it will turn in. I know that Ireland has got some lovely, lovely shops, especially in the design and craft space. And I hope that we can get through. And with the additional aspect of some of the campaigns that have been running, you know, the buy local thing, the Champion Green, it's all been really positive to try to maintain our industry and try to keep people moving forward. But I would say, as the other side of that discussion, that people forget very quickly, and all of a sudden it gets very easy to go online, order something, and have your respective Sam deliver it a few days later. So High Street will be challenged. I like to think it will come back in a slightly different form. I also like to think that because of the last couple of lockdowns, the experience has been that people really want to get back out and connect on that social aspect of what their lives. They want to go shopping again. They want to feel things, touch things, purchase things. So who knows where we'll be, but the one thing I would say, online is very much here to stay. And today we're going to be trying to look at aspects of you and what you do and how you might sharpen them up to make your business more effective. One commentator I read, I do a lot of research when I put these things together, and I thought this is a wonderful quotation, something I wish I'd said, but we certainly have gone from 2020 to 2030 in an instant. And I remember talking about this before, that technology has been transforming lifestyle, how we do things for a number of years. And the speed of change has been absolutely relentless and not always good, but you can't ignore that technology is constantly changing the way we do things. The smartphone has become the device of choice in terms of most things that we do on an everyday basis. I believe this staying the same is not an option. So if you're there and you're thinking, you know what, I'll weather the storm and we'll go back to doing what we did pre-COVID, I think, to be perfectly honest, you might be in a slightly difficult position longer term. Competition will demand that you adapt your business to place users at the center. Now, this has been something that's been going on for a number of years, and smart companies have been way ahead of the pack, where the users are at the center of their business. Everything is about making that user experience better, more, how would you say, acknowledging the choices that users have and the way in which they actually will access online services. So users, in my opinion, are key. And how can you make a user or a number of users central to what you do as a business, and certainly central to how you portray yourself online? So I'm coming back a little bit to something that's been around for years. Service design has been, I would say, since companies started to produce stuff, there's been service design. Because if you think about it, in the old world, where people were manufacturing things, all those aspects of making, where they had to have some sort of shape and rigor around how each of those departments interacted with one another. So we're going to be talking a little bit about service design. And these are the things that service design deals with: capturing experiences, customer journey mapping, service blueprint development, and customer personas. Now, it all sounds a little bit stiff and awkward, and how does that apply to me that's doing jewelry or making ceramics, etc., etc. But I believe that everything has a certain learning in it. And there is no doubt that when you start to look at how you make something, from the left, we tend to research, we tend to find something we like, a theme, an opportunity. As creative people, we tend to, visualize it, we research it, we will prototype it, we will test it. We're then into perhaps the beginning of, we tend to look at the materials, how we would produce it. You're then into the costing, the marketing, supplying, and the stocking. So this isn't an extensive list, but it's a fairly short list of some of the things that service designers will deal with. And you can imagine, if you're a smaller business, that things like stocking can become a challenge. Where do we keep everything? How many do we keep? Is that tying money up that I can't then release to do other things? Supplying, if you're supplying both your online world and, before COVID, your high street world, it's how many can we afford to send to the shop, etc., etc., etc. So there's a lot of the things that I've noted here, which are fairly typical, and they're very much typical of a service design approach to your business and how you actually make stuff and produce stuff. On the left, and there's no accident, the service design piece of the jigsaw, if you like, has always been much greater than the UX design. Now, on the left, you have a list of everything: materials, costing, testing, social media, packaging, disposable of waste. And there's this theory, which has been floated by a number of designers, of circular design. And basically what it is, everything you do in your business, from the materials you bring in to the waste you create, has a role and a purpose. And you actually document what you do with the waste. You don't send it to landfill, you repurpose it, etc., etc. So when you start to think about your business in a service design model, you start to see opportunities that perhaps weren't there before. The environmental pressures increasingly will become big in terms of you, your brand story, and how your business operates. And users will seek out companies that have good environmental policies. And you might think, well, I'm very small, I'm not a massive organization. But you know what? Sometimes increasingly the smaller companies will drive the agenda and can change things for the better. Coming back to the diagram, on the right-hand side, you've got all those things that you need to look at. Responsive website, which means a website which not only works on a landscape form, but will obviously also work on an iPad, on a smartphone. Smartphone, according to research, is the #1 device for buying and selling. So when you're thinking about a website, it's pretty vital that you consider how it will look in that portrait format. I also think the one thing that you need to consider is that building a website, looking at service design, looking at UX design, are all ways and means that you can perhaps identify opportunities within your business, new things that you might consider, new things that you might prototype. And I think that's really, really good and healthy in any creative business, that you're constantly taking change and innovation as a fundamental of what you do. When you break service design down, you've got customers' journeys. Now, what is a customer journey? Well, someone might come onto your website. They want to buy a present for a loved one, or to celebrate a wedding, or whatever. So that journey would be how they will go through your website to actually be able to buy one of your products. Now, that sounds very easy. It sounds, yeah, we can do that, not a problem. But it's incredible some of the things that research brings out in terms of those journeys. So I would really, really suggest to you that you begin to talk to people about websites, about online experiences, about shops, ideally, and begin to identify what those journeys could be, how they might alter in terms of the person. So a younger person may have a completely different way of doing something from an older person or a really old person like me. So there's lots of different ways of doing things. All I would suggest is we are in that review stage at the minute. COVID has perhaps given us a little bit of time to think about where we go next. And when you begin to look at customer journeys in a service design context, it's really, really important as an aid to improving your user experience. The better you know the customers and how they think and how they operate, the better in theory you will be at perhaps influencing a sale or marketing to them, etc., etc. The other thing is service blueprinting. And this is really taking raw material comes in, what do I do with it next? Where do I store it? So it's really begin to map out exactly how your business can work and how it might operate in the future. Again, very, very useful if you employ people because you've got some sort of map as to how the whole system works. So these are the basic elements of, the process. The experience is also gives you a real indication of how effective your business and your products are and how useful they are to the people that buy them. And that allows you to perhaps, think about, I can charge more for this because it's solving a problem. Today, solving a problem is huge. And if your business can solve a problem, be it a gift, be it a piece of ceramics, piece of jewelry, piece of fashion, if it has a purpose to it, in essence, you should be a much more effective company. Personas are huge, and the background photograph was from about 6 years ago, and it was some work that I was doing in the service design space around dementia. Now, the two ladies are people that worked for a home in Wales, and they were asked about certain things in terms of how they reacted to technology, how good they were at it, what their purpose was within the organization. And that allowed us on the service design side of things to build up a sort of snapshot of different staff and how they worked, and then begin to look for similarities in terms of how the organization would operate going forward. This is a key thing, and if you have to think about a service, there must be something wrong with it, because most people, especially today, just accept that it works. And we had, back in the day, a huge hiatus around technology. Everything was being replaced by technology. And we had that thing, especially in the financial world, that sometimes products didn't work very well. They lost out on the connection with the customers and the consumers simply because the actual service design part of what they're doing hadn't been translated well enough into digital tools. So what I would suggest is, and I'm going to give you some web addresses at the end of this talk, there are tools online you can get just to look at how you would do personas, for example, how you would do different aspects of service design. So again, have a look and pick out what works for you and what you feel comfortable with. And whether you're doing it in a very small scale or a bigger scale, it can be a very useful exercise in terms of improving your business and what you do going forward. This is a sort of given. Poor service design can affect your design craft business in a variety of ways. And this is sort of, I'm always a great believer that people buy from people. And if you think about going down to the shop in the village or the town to get your paper every day, there's certain protocols around how the person behind the counter addresses you, asks you how you're doing, has a conversation with it. I'm just a great believer that sometimes great service design highlights the importance of people talk to people, and we need to find a way to ensure that that's still the case. In terms of bad service design, well, it can be missed orders. You don't have a system for making, for producing. Therefore, when things get pressured, there's nothing to rely on in terms of this is how we do it. I think the second one, there's no ability to scale up with demand, and there's no doubt that a lot of makers are experiencing good sales now that they've translated their agenda over into the online world. But if you can't scale up, if you've no ability where you can scale up, sometimes you will end up missing orders. The other thing which is very evident, we tend to throw money at stuff to get orders out, and any extra money you make, any profit, simply goes into making stuff, and therefore you're almost standing still as a business. And I think the last point is something that I've always heard most times in the mentoring that I do, that suddenly the production overtakes the creative input. And we're in a business where we take relatively small beginnings and we transform it into products that people want to buy. And that is an immense talent, and it's something that this industry really has been shouting about over the last number of years in Ireland. So when I hear people talking about, I can't get back to being creative again because I'm so taken up in production, I start to think, well, is there a way in which the service design model could work more effectively and more efficiently as you go forward? Does scale matter? I work alone. Well, I believe that scale doesn't matter. You can be a one-man band, you can be a 5-man band, 10-man band, and lady band, whatever it happens to be. But you know, the service design model, the service design approach can help you identify those difficult little spots in your agenda which need attention and which may well help you improve and be more efficient and make some more money as you go forward. 84% of businesses that improve their customer experience see an increase in their revenue. No doubt about that. The better you are at what you do and how you do it, and the more efficient you are at it, the chances are that you will have an increase in revenue. The customers will feel it. The customers will have that confidence around ordering from you, repeat ordering from you, recommending. So there's no doubt that that's the sort of statistic that is highly good to acknowledge and take on board. 8 to 10 customers will pay extra for a better user experience. There's probably none of us that haven't at times looked at 2 offers and said, you know what, I'm guaranteed they will have it there by Friday. So on that basis, whilst I love what they do, I accept that they will make it happen. And I think that is huge in terms of a business and in our sector. I just wanted to finish off with a couple little websites. This one started up. Ireland has been dealing with service design for a number of years. And I would really urge you to go on that site and have a look at some of the projects and the way in which Ireland is really trying to use service design to improve business, the economy, etc., etc. And on the left, it's the designer's website, which has huge resources, a lot of stuff that's just worth maybe having a look on for half an hour with a cup of coffee, and it's all around service design. And then you can apply the tools in a way that suits your business as you go forward. The servicedesignTools.org, you will find on there lots of downloadable charts and bits and pieces that can help you perhaps just begin to rationalize your thinking as you adopt this approach to how you make and how you work. And then the Design Council in the UK, again, a vast resource for all things service design and fresh thinking around innovation and how design can make such a difference to your business as you move forward. Okay, so that's service design. So we're into UX. Now, UX basically applies to anything that is experienced. So it can be your kettle, it can be your washing machine. In our case, it might be a website. The one thing about UX, it's much more about feel and attitude, etc., etc. And if you think about the ATMs, which are rapidly disappearing. If you can remember back when the first ATMs came out, they were difficult, clunky, hard to use. We're maybe now reaching a point where they're slightly more intuitive, and there's maybe a better user experience if you can find one. But it's really referring to everything that shaped this experience. All aspects of the end user and interaction with the company, its services and its product. And Don Norman was a great sort of service design, user experience guru. And again, the sorts of things that Don Norman says, and you just think, yeah, absolutely, that's what it's all about. It's all about the interaction with the company. And I use the word company in a very small size or a big. It's not just companies, it can be individuals, individual makers, individual designers, individual whatever. But there's no doubt that the more you can get into this user experience model, the more effective you will be in terms of what you do. UX and UI. UI tends to be how it looks. So it's typography, it's color, it's photography, it's what it says. Whereas UX tends to be how it works. And we've all been here. It looks great, but wasn't very easy to use. So on the one hand, great UI, but the other side, poor UX. And I would suggest to you that UX is probably the stronger element of that. How it works can sometimes paper over how it looks. So if you apply UX to a website, how it feels, and you talk about a website, well, how did the website feel? Well, later on, I'll show you a couple of examples of a couple that I think made it feel fantastic. One in particular. Other things that UX, like service design, we're talking about customer journeys, wireframing, where you're sort of putting the skeleton of what the site can be, the homepage, the about, the story, the shop, the contact, you know, the security aspects where you pay the money. GDPR, which most of you probably know, is around how you store data and how you use cookies to, you know, influence how well the site works and how you capture data, possibly in terms of keeping records of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff in here that I've just put down as a list, and I'm not going to necessarily go through them one by one. But there is no doubt that the big thing I find when I'm mentoring and I'm looking at a mentee's website, I will often ask, have you got the analytics for your site? And there'll be a sort of a slightly puzzled look, and then, what do you mean? And the wonderful thing about online is that you can generally find out how things are doing. Whereas in the real world, a friend told me this, or my mate down the golf club said something else. Whereas in the virtual world, you can track most of the time. Mr. Zuckerberg and Facebook do a big job of tracking amongst other companies. And Google, you can actually sign up, you can put in your web address, and they will begin to tell you how well your homepage, for example, is performing. If you're finding that people are only staying on it for a few seconds, well, maybe you need to look at where things are on it, what you're saying, and you're trying to get them to the shop area. There's maybe things there that you don't need to have. So home pages are very, very important. And again, with Google Analytics, they can tell you the search engines, the devices, they can track, you know, the number of visitors, etc., etc. Have a look at it. If you're using Shopify, I think they do have that facility, as probably do other websites. So again, a huge tool in terms of your marketing, in terms of how you're doing things that can inform change as you move forward. Customer reviews are massive. We live in a data-driven world. So again, it is looking at what people say about you, your products, and perhaps your website. And a big one, I think, is accessibility for people who perhaps have issues, physical, whatever they happen to be. They may have issues with eyesight, where you need to begin to think about people with different sorts of vision and how they might view your website. We live in a world where we need to have everybody on board and not in any way isolate certain markets simply because they don't fit with our thinking. Just to talk about SEO very quickly, search engine optimization. Well, what matters to Google? Google are the biggest on the planet. Again, high quality content, mobile friendliness. Does your website work well on a computer, on an iPad, on a smartphone? Good user experience, site security, and verified reviews. So this is a sort of nod to some of the content that you might put onto your site. And when you're thinking about, do I invest in really good photography? Do I bring a writer in or someone that can help me with really shortening down the content? These are the sort of things that Google rate highly. So it's good to know that before you begin the process. This is the website that I saw, and I was literally jumping in the car to go to Dublin. I just wanted the jeans. And as a big fan of Levi's for most of my adult life, to suddenly defect within a few seconds to native and want to go to lovely Dublin to have a pair made, I was absolutely blown away. But I just love this as a website. I just love the sort of the quality of it, how they've presented themselves, and they've really drilled down into the whole user impression of why you should stay on the homepage and where you should go next. So things like the measurement guide, their story, their denims, the shop, it's all fairly well right up front. And you have this gorgeous photograph of this man making the jeans, etc., etc. Just coming into the measurement bit, there's no doubt finding a pair of jeans that fit properly and ones that you like can be an absolute challenge in itself. But they've really thought through the user experience, showing you how to measure them, how to, really take the best measurements you can to send off to have your jeans made. And then the final thing is increasingly websites, I think, try to deflect people contacting them. My opinion, sometimes to their detriment. Banks have got incredible where you have a problem that doesn't really get answered with the questions they field on the website, and you tend to go round and round in circles through lots of menus of press 1, press 5, press 6. In this case, they've got their phone number, they've got their email, and they just give you the impression that, yeah, we can ask them, we can find out where our jeans are, etc., etc. This is a bit of a statement, 2 seconds, and I'm accepting that broadband is a fairly major issue. Ireland, like most countries, has good places for broadband and bad places. But if you think about it, 2 seconds is incredibly fast. The other side of it is that if you have got a homepage, it's making sure that the images are sufficiently small that they will load in terms of their file size. So there's lots of things that you can work with your web designer, if you have one on board, to improve so that you can get their homepage, which will load very, very fast. And the expectation may well not be there in a lot of cases, but don't lose the fact that you need to be that quick off the mark in order to make your site more effective. This is a classic. I think it's something like 80% of all transactions are aborted when it gets to the payment bit. And if you think about it, someone's gone through the website, picked what they want, chosen the color, chosen the size, it's in the shopping cart, and then they want to pay. And I had this experience before Christmas with a certain website, and 3 times we tried and 3 times we failed. And then I discovered that the payments had actually gone into my account, or gone out of my account. And we had this whole thing of getting them back, etc., etc. So all I would say is that if there's one area to get right on your site, it's the security and the payment side of it. Offer different platforms, whether it's Apple Pay, whether it's PayPal, whatever it happens to be, but find a solution which can work for anybody coming onto your site, and almost reverse engineer it. That if we can get the payment working well, the rest will give us a better chance of selling. Again, user experience, user-centered businesses grow 43% more than their peers. The world now, and we've seen it with Apple a lot, with mobiles and so forth, they tend to have forums where people can post their opinion of the latest iPhone. And what they're doing there is basically collecting the issues. So it could be the screen's too shiny, it's too slippy, the phone isn't big enough, etc., etc., etc. And what that does is set up a wonderful example of co-collaboration where the customer almost feels that they had a part in the development of the product. Great for branding, great for storytelling. And if the customer feels that he's empowered to make those sorts of changes, well, he feels perhaps he becomes a fan of you and your product and what you do as you move forward. Normal user, I think sometimes I see a lot of websites where they've picked one persona or one user and they've almost built it for that person. And what I would say when you came to UX is that there's no such thing as a normal user. There's lots of users, but if you're almost setting out where you're deciding who should use your products or who should buy or how should they go through the journey on your website, you may reach a few issues as you go down the road. Omni-channel online experience tends to mean that they want the same information on lots of different devices. So what they see on the website will also be on their smartphone, on an iPad, etc., etc., etc. And it's just giving a much better presentation of information about you, photographs of the products, how to buy them, etc., etc. And the one thing I would say that sometimes retailing on the web, we tend to forget about stuff like Christmas and birthday. And you may find this amazing, but sometimes we're running around trying to get content for Instagram or Facebook or whatever it happens to be. Don't forget that in this country, there is a sort of retail logic to certain holidays, anniversaries, and make sure you're updating the information to acknowledge that. You know, Father's Day is coming up. Why not consider this? So really get inside the psyche of how to sell and how to retail your products online. The last thing I would say about user experience, we do live in the world of data and review. So I think it's really, really good to have a protocol when things go wrong. And we see it in relation to perhaps restaurants or pubs or whatever it happens to be, when we were able to go to them, that somebody had a bad experience and immediately went online to slate the place and what they were doing. So I never encourage getting into an online spat with customers, but I think it's good to think about returns, what happens if something needs to come back, who pays the postage, and have that as part of your terms and conditions as you go forward. I would always encourage that customers always read. And even if you're slightly annoyed by what they've said, try to cool the rhetoric and try to have a response that, you know, we're sorry on this occasion that we perhaps didn't exceed your expectation, etc., etc., etc. So again, like the finance, reverse engineer the experience of being on the site and turn it to your advantage rather than slug it out online. Never a good place to be. Start with function and build your site around customer personas and journeys. Most people I encounter start with the look. So they'll have a Squarespace site, they'll have a Wix site, they might have a Shopify site, and their first instinct is, I want to make my product look like this. Whereas I would be really encouraging, think about how the site will function, how you will get your users into the shop without feeling you're sort of shoving them in, but get the shop pretty prominent. That's what they're there for, and that's what you'd like them to be part of. And that will all come from looking at personas and journeys. Why do people shop online? Why will they shop on your site? Again, Google are great in terms of themes, searches that people are actually doing. So are Instagram. This is probably the most successful site. It's not even probably, it is the most successful site on the planet. I can't think of another one that is. It may not be the most beautiful, but I can tell you that Amazon spend billions of dollars deciding where a button should go, deciding where the account should go, and basically looking at the whole issue of how people find their way around the site. I often, as a bit of a challenge, say to people, how would Amazon sell your product? And it really is as a sort of an information thing where they might look at an Amazon and say, how would they do craft, or how would they do ceramics and jewelry? And I know they do bits and pieces, but it's sometimes good to look at the guys that are making an awful lot of money at it and decide what you can learn from them in terms of the tricks that they employ to actually get people to buy. Rothlu, I talked a little bit. I've had the privilege of working with Frances over the last few months. Again, her new website, beautiful photography, showing the product. And we're making no bones about it. There's a call to action on the homepage. Shop now. There's no messing about. There's no, I did this and I did that and I went to college. It's straight in. We're trying to sell product. Obviously, the other issues in terms of the collections, very nicely designed in terms of you can see at a glance exactly where you can go on the site. And Frances has really drilled down into the curation of her products, the most popular, the ones that are perhaps the most interesting. We did a lot of work around curation because the old site just had lots and lots of stuff. And I believe that customers, depending on their journey, if they're looking for a gift, we've got to steer them in certain ways to get them through that process. So be aware that it's a little bit like you're creating an exhibition of your products. What do people want to see? And then how can they buy it? And then this is a little drop-down menu. So if you want to know a little bit more about Frances, all the information's on the left. But lovely website designed by, I think it was Far Sky in Galway. And I think Mike did an absolutely beautiful job with the aid of great jewelry and the most stunning images from a photographer in Dublin, who I don't know his name, I do apologize, but great website. Design Ireland, as many of you will know, have a wonderful website where they're trying to basically collect and keep and have all the makers and designers that we have around Ireland. And as I say, they're giving, on the one hand, the left-hand side, it's sort of, your space, and then it goes through into the pen and paper website on the right-hand side. And I just love that sort of connection between the photography and then when you go onto the actual site, it's sort of carrying that lovely confidence from a design point of view. And ideally you're clicking on the big photographs to take you into different areas of the site. Iron Street East, again, lovely products, beautiful ceramics, nice photography, lifestyle. They've pulled in some other products, just to show you how the products can be used. And then on the right-hand side, they have their acknowledgement of the training and the courses they run, which unfortunately they can't do currently. But you just get that sense of, yeah, I'd like to go and do that and do some ceramics in the next wee while, and hopefully we will. And then Tidings, again, someone that I've been working with over the last year. Great story, interesting website. Neve's brought in her lookbook, but again, the shop's right up front, and it's just a lovely place to be in terms of her website and then her additional social media. So making it happen, work with a web designer with experience. I always think it's a double-edged sword. I know financially, some people don't have the money to give to a web designer. And I know that there was some support for online trading and so forth that the Leos were offering. I just think sometimes when it comes to web design, if you can meet someone, talk to someone who gets you and what you do, you're sort of halfway there in terms of coming up with something that can really reflect you as a maker and the experience you want to portray. I think look at other designers, how they sell, research them, prototype your website, test it with your friends, you know, get your uncle or your auntie to go on and try to buy something and see if there's any issues around the actual UX of the site. Are there little things that are a glitch that prevent them from getting through the journey? And I think platforms, as I've mentioned, Squarespace, I've mentioned Wix, Shopify, there's loads, there's WordPress, etc., etc. Choose the best option. Obviously, I think Shopify is great because the security aspects of it are so strong. Read up on them and decide which one perhaps is the one for you. I think it's constant review and identify issues early. Design, they talk about failing quickly, and I'm a great believer in that. Try to get something up there as a prototype and then test it and see how effective it can be for you and what you're doing. Collaborate, I mentioned that as regards to Apple. You know, you might do a short survey on Instagram, where it happens to be, just asking a few customers what they think of the new site. Did they find any difficulties? What they liked, what they didn't like. And then they will be advocates for you and your site as you go forward. And really acknowledge change as a fundamental to building an online presence. Technology is still progressing. Things we can do today we couldn't do before. And when you begin to think about the impact of AI and how it's beginning to impact on, for example, opticians, how you're able to upload a photograph, put the glasses on, see how they will look. There's lots of stuff coming on, lots of apps that could well help you sell and influence people to buy your product. If good branding gives your product a voice, a good website with intuitive functionality helps them buy your products. It has to be intuitive. People will give you no regard for a site which is edgy, which doesn't follow the normal protocols of the online world. And all that will happen is they'll give up, because you know what? They don't have time to waste trying to do something different when most of the time they just know where the buttons will be and where the menu will be, etc., etc. So really, really drill down on that. Thank you very much indeed for listening.
Colin, thank you so much. That was very informative. A whistle-stop tour on what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And I'm going to put a pitch in there for a number of the lovely makers that you mentioned, and particularly native denim. The reason I'm picking them out is that when I first came upon them, I think about 2.5 years ago, I thought they were really impressive and dynamic, and their website's super. And I think they'll all kind of give us motivation, because by my calculation, I think they had just about a year or a year and a half of trading before COVID. I think they stopped in, they started in late 2018, or, you know, round about that time. So, I mean, I think it's given us an awful lot of food for thought. They're also very open, you know, to speak to other makers. And Dublin City Leo had them speak at an event I was at. And they're really great. So I mean, I'm sure they would help with advice and everything. So I'd really like to thank you for the information that you've given us. People find it very informative. And is it definitely that it has to be function over look, even when we're dealing with craft? Yes, is that what I leave with? Has to be intuitive.
I think,
Yeah.
you know, for me, look is easy for people in our industry. As a graphic designer, I was doing something fairly recently, and somebody said, you make that look so easy. And that's like 40 years experience. And I think when you look at people working in jewelry and ceramics and some of the stunning design work that's been done in Ireland in this industry, we're all very capable of making it look good. But for me, if I want to buy that product, I want an experience which is quick, to the point, and one that understands me as the buyer. And increasingly on websites, you will probably see where they will have almost like they will fill in your address, they will fill in your credit card details. So that whole world is becoming more and more sorted. I'm not suggesting that, you know, the people that are watching this necessarily run away with impressions. You know, suddenly my website's going to cost 30,000 euros to produce because I need all these tools. But I'm just suggesting that you think a little bit more passionately about how you make your experience of buying from you better. And if you need to offer Apple Pay because of the amount of people on an iPhone, try and find a way that you can do that rather than just having one payment method. But again, it's all about money, it's all about budget, it's all about time. When I look at the Native Genes thing, I just get so confident about our industry and the potential of the online world being so effective. I mean, literally, I was going at 11:30 from Belfast to Dublin to get a pair of jeans. If we could have met Mr. Native, he had the order. And that was really because I loved, okay, the look attracted me. It didn't, you know, but then I found the tools that were there to allow me to measure, to purchase, to order with confidence. You know, the rest was easy. And I would have paid the 179 euros there and then just to go through the experience. So I think if you're looking at that, I'm not suggesting that everyone has to get to that stage, but I also showed people who are at a much smaller scale, who are just doing simple things really, really nicely. If I have a criticism of sometimes people in technology, they start adding in too much. So all of a sudden, it's, oh, you need a blog, and you need this, and you need a meeting organizer, and you need an online comments thing. And I always say, you're one person. How do you manage all that? So less is more, in my opinion. Do simple things well, and then progressively improve them as you've got a bit of money or a bit of time.
Okay, we have a number of people here who are saying, you know, that okay, it's good hint, Anne. Anne Harrington Reese is saying it's good to include a video telling the story and why on the homepage. If you're going to is it going though to slow down the loading speed?
I think it's just making sure you're getting that. The video might be a link, but again, I'm not a techie. You need to talk to the guys that are really good. But the key thing is videos are great because they get you really good engagement with the site, which works well from an SEO point of view. Instagram, for example, according to what I learned, they have an algorithm which is machine based. So the more time you spend on a post, they will grade and then they will send you other stuff according to how you react. Video is huge, like good photography, in terms of capturing people's attention. So I would agree with what the person said. Video is great, but try to get the file size and the length of it to be pretty short. And again, that's back to planning, thinking about the key things you do and how effective you can be in terms of communication.
Okay, I don't usually allow people to sell their services, whatever, on this show, so to speak. But I have a lady here, and she's happy to advise on SEO. And she said she has a 100% success rate, and she's got reasonable charges. So I'm sending that off to everybody, and it's buyer beware. I don't know the lady. I'm sure she's very good, maybe worth a try. Yep. Okay. So that's the lady's name is Nee. I also have another guy called Kevin, right? And Kevin thinks that your advice was great and very useful. And he's a founder, he's built a business, but he's also a brand and web designer. So he's happy to answer any web questions that people may have, so I think that's another nice offer. That
thank you, Kevin.
I might want to take up on. What do you think of that, Colin?
Yep, brilliant.
So there is Kevin's email advice, and I hope you're not too inundated, Kevin. But this is an area that we're getting stronger at, and I'm going to reiterate that the Design Cross Council, along with the Leos nationally, are running 2 boot camps, one of which is ongoing at the moment. The other one we're going to start recruiting for in a short number of weeks. So I would always, some people did call me and ask me questions on it, and my aged experience is don't let anything go past. If you get onto it, go for it. So just don't say, well, we'll maybe do it next year. I might have the opportunity to make this available next year. And hopefully you'll be implementing the advice that you get this year to help next year's sales. So my advice would be, if you're interested in the boot camp, please just apply, go for it. The Leos are also keeping going on their trading online vouchers. They have been extremely supportive. So please remember that that's there. And also, I'm doing a series of webinars with mentors and trainers and specialists such as Colin to augment the boot camp as well. So I'd like to thank everybody for being with us today. I hope it's been useful. I find it very clear, Colin. So thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Niamh and Keith for offering their help. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone, and thanks, audience, for joining me. And Colin, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.